Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. This is Ryan Singer, your host. I hope you're doing well. I'm excited today because we get to talk about one of my favorite things. We get to talk about ghosts or hauntings in a performance space. And as you know, I do stand-up comedy, acting, et cetera, as my main job. And this podcast is a passion project I've been doing for 9 years now. And I love the haunted theater. I love the haunted space of performance. There's so much rich history when it comes to these venues. And I mean, I think since the beginning of time, we've had people in our, whether it was in our village or wherever else, that were the actors that told the stories. And theaters are some of the oldest buildings in any town. I've had the luxury of traveling across this great country of ours for many, many years. And theaters are always the oldest or some of the oldest buildings in every town you go to. And I've got James Smith from the Rohs Opera House here with us today to talk about just that. James, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ryan.
I mean, I grew up in Southern Ohio. I grew up in Dayton, so not all that far from where you guys are located, correct?
That's right. We're about 1 hour south of Cincinnati. So I've been to Dayton many a time, to the Air Force Museum there, and I had an aunt and uncle that lived up there. So
yeah,
traveled that road some. So.
Yeah, definitely. And now you're in Cynthiana, Kentucky. Is that correct?
That's right. And thanks for pronouncing it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up in that area, it's it really behooves me to make sure I know how to talk about all the places that aren't too far from me growing up. I mean, Kentucky has such a rich history, just in general, and I'm trying to think about the actual size of Cynthiana, and I can't place it in my mind. Like, about how big of a town or city are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about a pretty small city. 6,300, I think, was the last census numbers. So people probably don't know where we're at, but we're like 1 hour south of Cincinnati, 45 minutes from Lexington, Kentucky. So kind of there in that, close enough that we could pop in a car and, eat out at Cincinnati or Lexington if we wanted to.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I know for a fact I've passed through there at least a few times over the years. And 1871, is that how far back we're going to the origins of the Rohs?
That is, it was built in 1871 as a Aeolian music hall. And as far as we know, and we've tried to do as much investigation as we can, it's the oldest theater in Kentucky that's continually operating.
That's really cool.
That's our claim. And as far as the paranormal, I know we're here to talk about ghosts. It was on a block that was burned in the Second Battle of Cynthiana during the Civil War. So, I mean, some of our ghosts may be, older than the Opera House itself. So we just don't know.
Oh, wow. That's one of the things that fascinates me the most about ghosts and the paranormal in general. It was a few years back where I kind of had this realization where I'm like, if you go back to the beginning of humans, right? So way back, almost everywhere you're walking around the earth, for the most part, you're walking on bones. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And once we, get further and further along in being able to unlock the potential communication between, these bones, as I'm calling them, with these people who had personalities, people who had wants, desires, fears, just like all of us do now. And being able to tap into that and trying to understand, like, is that personality still there? Or is it an imprint of something that happened that they're repeating over and over again? I do want to get into the types of phenomena that you experience at the Opera House. But first, so 150 plus years now. Did you guys have a big blowout for the 150?
We did 2 years ago. We did. It was fun.
Okay, what'd you guys do? I
We
mean,
had
I
a
know it
big
was kind
open
of in,
house.
yeah, I know it was in
It,
COVID kind of, but right, but so
it was towards the end of COVID. We had it December, so we decorated. We went all out, decorated for the holidays, and then had a big open house for the whole community, inviting them free, fed them, gave them tours. Talked about ghosts, talked about the history, and all that. And it was a lot of fun. In
that's
fact, so
cool.
much fun. We wanted to do it the next year, but 151 just didn't seem like you know
Well, don't tell
like
that to my Bacardi rum drinking friends who who seem to love Bacardi 151, which I won't touch that stuff. It's a little too strong for me. But yeah, 151 just doesn't have the same ring, does it? The
no, it doesn't.
It is funny how we like round numbers. Just what is that about us? Like as people, we just love like 5, 10, 20. Like we just love the round number for some reason.
Right? I don't know.
Um, so on your website it's pretty interesting. You've got audio clips and you've got video clips of evidence that has been compiled or been captured at the Opera House. And I'm
Well,
curious, or what, go ahead.
well, that's some of the older stuff. We haven't updated our the evidence that we've put on our website probably for about 10 years, and there's a lot better stuff than is out on the website. If people do a Google search for Ross Opera House, they're more likely to get some paranormal group that's investigated, posted a video or evidence somewhere than they are likely to get what we're showing this weekend.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and for those listening who kind of want to do it on the fly, it's ROHS Opera
Right.
House in Cynthiana, Kentucky. So if you want to maybe kind of peep at some of that stuff while you're listening to the interview we're doing here, feel free. That's how you spell it. Just make sure you spell it correctly, and you'll get to the right place. The Are you doing 7 nights a week there?
No, we're a weekend only theater pretty much. We're usually open on Friday and Saturday nights, and then we do a Sunday matinee. We're first run movies most weekends, but we'll throw a concert in there, a couple live plays a year. So we do a lot of different things.
Cool. I
But
wonder what's that? What's the capacity?
downstairs in the expanded theater, we have 240 seats. Upstairs in the original theater, which dates back to that's the 1871 part of the building. That we can hold about 50 to 60 people.
Oh wow, that's really cool. So there's two separate spaces.
Yes.
That's really cool. Has anyone done? This is just the comedian in me. Has anyone done a comedy show there?
We have, and we've got one scheduled in May from a kind of more of a local comedian that has some ties to Cynthiana. But we haven't done a lot of comedy. But we just recently got our liquor license, which kind of opens that crowd up to, to bigger crowd. So
Yeah, yeah. And as a comedian, I have to say that, it does open up to a bigger crowd. And sometimes you don't want some of those people coming because they're there for more for the drinking than for the listening. But no, that's great. Well, that's great news. Yeah, because I'm having this idea. I'm like, how fun would it be to do like a kind of a comedy paranormal show and then maybe even present some evidence afterwards and then do an investigation. I mean, it could be a good time. But anyway, we'll worry about that later.
that's
Um,
right. But we're
so
interested. We're interested. That sounds like fun.
yeah, I mean, that would be a great time. And, because most of the places I perform, people will say that they're haunted. And like a lot of comedy clubs, a lot of theaters, there's something about these places, right? Where so many different people are coming. They're experiencing pretty intense emotions, are having a good time. They're crying. They're, having all these things happen inside of them. It stirs us, right? And it always has as just a human creature. We love watching a really good performance. And
Right.
what in ghost stories are some of the oldest stories ever told, whether it's Shakespeare and even long before Shakespeare. The most engaging stories are usually of the paranormal, of the ghost stories. And I'm curious about the Ross, like when it first started, when we first started realizing like there might be, some people here who aren't always, paying for a ticket to get in. Uh, who's hanging around right now?
Well, the first story that we know of, and me and my partners have owned it for about 16 years now. We bought it in the early 2000s, but there's some stories going back to the 60s of a lady in a white dress appearing to the projectionist or appearing to the janitor who was cleaning up late one night by themselves. And so that's several decades worth of stories. And then when we took over and we realized that, hey, we can make a little money on this paranormal thing by letting people come in and investigate, they started having experiences with children and tall, shadowy male figures. And the EVPs that people get are just all over the board, from kids to African American women to male voices to female voices. So it just opened it up to where it's not uncommon to walk in, turn on the lights, and start hearing things almost immediately. Now that doesn't happen every day, but it doesn't surprise us so much anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. There's so when you bought the theater, are you in theater? Do you act?
I do now after buying a theater.
I was
I
gonna
did,
say like it's a
I, it's interesting how we bought it. Cynthiana was going through the Great Recession at the time, early 2000s. Downtown was pretty much like a ghost town. There was one restaurant downtown. The theater was open, and that was about it. Most of the other buildings were closed. And when we heard that the theater was closing, we opened it more so to save the town than because of our love for theater or movies or anything like that. Because we knew that if the theater went down, Cynthiana was just might as well board everything up and move away. So we took the leap. We rented it from the owner. We went in there and put a fresh coat of paint on things and tried to repair as many seats as we could, and then opened back up. And through the years, it's been 16, 17 years now. We've turned it around, and believe that we kind of led the renaissance of downtown Cynthiana. Now every building is full of a shop. There's a microbrewery 2 doors down. We have hundreds of people coming to town on the weekends to come to the things that we're doing at the theater. So, it wasn't for our love of theater that we opened it. It was for our love of town, and we've fallen in love with theater. To where when we started doing live plays, all of us have auditioned for a part because we needed someone in that part in order to do a play. And then we realized, hey, this is pretty fun. So that's kind of how we got into it, and
that's really
where we
cool.
still are. So
And it's, I would say that it's nearly impossible not to fall in love with it once you get into it. And I studied theater in college, because I knew I wanted to do stand up comedy, and I knew I had to be comfortable on stage performing. And it was very, very quickly, uh, when I was, maybe in my first class, where I was just like, oh my God, this is really fun. It's really exhilarating. And I mean, there is nothing like moments before opening night on something. I mean, talk
right,
about nerves. I mean,
right,
stand up comedy is one thing. If I forget a line, guess what? I can make up whatever I want, in the spot. But when you're part of an ensemble and people are relying on you and you have to remember where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be saying and thinking and feeling, it's live. There is some real juice happening, and that cannot be replicated anywhere when it comes to live theater.
No, it's like uh, if you've done a play and you've hit all the lines and things were perfect and you get that standing ovation at the end. It's like hitting a grand slam, in the seventh game of the World Series in the ninth inning. It's like you walk away with that kind of high exhilaration. Can't wait till you do it again.
Right, and once it gets in you, you can't get it out. It's in your veins, it's in your cells now. There's no escaping the allure of the play, of the performance at that point. I totally relate to that. That's a really cool story. You know, I I haven't talked to a million different owners of these of performance spaces in general, but there there does seem to be um, a real love that happens, and like you said, whether it comes retroactively or from the very beginning, there I think it's important to understand who's taking care of a space that may have the activity, and I think it helps shape the type of activity you may get to a certain degree, potentially in some cases. And I'm curious about your experiences personally when it comes to any kind of activity at the opera house.
Well, of the four of us that are partners, I'm probably the biggest chicken of all of us. When I hear things, when there could be something there, when I feel that presence around me, I'm typically turning and heading for the door to try to get out as fast as I can, or calling somebody and saying, "Hey, you've got to get down here. I'm not going to go any further until somebody else is with me." With that said, we had a median come in a few years ago and said that there was a particular spirit in the building that particularly liked the tall, skinny guy with dark hair because he was so easy to scare. And so it was.
And you're like, oh,
It,
come on, man.
that's right. It was supposedly this little boy. We have a little boy ghost that will sometimes make appearances during movies. We'll be showing a movie. He'll walk out on stage. Uh, and parents will, or people watching the movie will come get us at the concession stand and say, "Hey, somebody's letting their kid run around the theater." And we'll just say, "No, that's just our little ghost boy." And so supposedly it's this little boy that has an affinity for scaring the crap out of me and running me out of the building. But and I seen a little boy one time, so maybe that's why he has some kind of connection to me. I walked out on our balcony. We have a balcony in the theater, and I walked out. I was the only one in the building. All the lights were on, and that's typically when things happen in our buildings, when all the lights are on and you're least expecting it. There was a little boy standing down by the stage. He looked about maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, that kind of time frame. And I walked out on the balcony. I stopped because he looked as solid as any other little boy. And then he turned and he ran and just disappeared into thin air right in front of me. I still feel chills, thinking about that time. That's the only time I've ever seen something. But you hear whistling all the time. There's a ghost that likes to whistle in the theater. So you hear that. And supposedly it's bad luck to whistle in the theater. So,
Well, the there's so many old God, why am I blanking on the phrase? Like these things you're not supposed to say or things you're not supposed
right.
to do, especially before a live superstitions when it comes
That's right.
to, getting ready to do a play or anything else. And like you never say good luck. There's a name of a play that you're never supposed to say out loud as well. It's really wrapped in a shroud of superstition, which is part of the allure for me. That is a very high level ghost sighting, by the way. Just
it is.
I
It's
mean,
never happened before. That was early on too. That was about 14, 15 years ago.
yeah, not a ton of people ever get to experience seeing like a full body apparition in such a profound way. Is there?
Now, we have another partner, Roger, who has seen. We have a lady in a white dress that, like I said, has been seen since the '60s. She appears at various times, and he has seen her twice. And both times he's seen her, he said that she appears as solid. You know, she's not shimmering. You can't see through her. She appears solid in a long white dress. It goes all the way down to the floor, all the way down to her wrist, all the way up to her neck. It's like Victorian in appearance. And he's seen her twice. No interaction, just he's seen her walking through the theater twice. So,
Wow. I mean, I'm curious if there's any change in, I don't know, your perspective that has occurred after your initial sighting. Were you already a believer in ghosts?
no, I was a skeptic, and to complicate it even more, I was a minister that just kind of dismissed all of that paranormal stuff as just something that either people made up, hallucinate. I mean, just and but after you see something, after you experience some things, it kind of makes you question. I mean, I know that there's something there because I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I know too many people that I trust that have experienced those things too. So there is something there that's paranormal. Is it souls of the dead? I don't know. I can't answer that, and I don't think anybody can. Are there some kind of spirit beings that we don't know about? Are they leftover energy? I've thought about all that stuff, and I just can't wrap my head around it. And I think that's one of the things that's appealing to people about it, wanting to experience those things for themselves because they just don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. The possibilities are endless and the certainty is zero.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I think there are times where we get a pretty good idea and we're like, you know what? I think I got a grip on this. I think I can wrap my brain around this particular thing. And then that particular thing says, "Oh, really? You do, huh? Well,
That's
let's
right.
see about that." And then throws you a curveball and you're like, "Okay, I needed to
And
be reminded."
that's right. And with our ghosts, and I've told you about the lady in the white dress. There's a shadow man. There's a couple of children. We have no idea who they are. We don't have any stories of people getting murdered gruesomely in the theater and their spirits are still there. We have no idea. And so that kind of lends itself to the mystery as well. And so, that's one of the things when groups come, they're always trying to get an EVP with a name or, those types of things. And we just haven't. It's still just a big mystery.
Yeah, and I do know it's tricky, I think, because especially different groups are coming in constantly, it sounds like. And one group will come in potentially and say, we've got EVPs, our medium or our psychic is saying this is who it is, this is who's here. And then next weekend another group comes in and says, we're getting information from our psychic, our medium, that this is who's here, this is their name, this is what happened
Right.
to them. And then the next week, it's boom, boom. And it's not a point of emphasis necessarily for all paranormal groups to be like, well, we showed up and we identified who was here. And that's just the way it is. And that's
Right.
true, that we cannot prove in a court of law or by any modern measurable standards that are accepted by science, but you just have to believe us. I think that's not the point of paranormal investigation for most people who are into it, right? And I think it's having that experience, making that
Right.
connection with something outside of ourselves that probably and indeed is connected to us, and we just didn't realize it before. Now, I'm curious, do you participate in? I want to ask you about the ghost investigations and the ghost walks, but
Right.
before we do that, I want to take a quick little break here, so we can keep the lights on. And just as a
Okay.
reminder to the listeners, you can go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer, and for $3 a month over at the Patreon page, you can listen to all the interviews free of ads, so no commercials. Who wants a commercial like this? If this was a movie from the back in the day, this is where that cartoon would pop in about let's all go to the lobby, let's all go to the lobby. So you don't have to go to the lobby if you're over at the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Ryan Singer. And we're back. So I'm talking with James Smith from the Rohs Opera House in Cynthiana, Kentucky. We're having a fun chat about the little boy ghost, the woman in the white dress. A full body apparition has been experienced by you, which is to me a very profound paranormal experience. And we could almost call it in the field of parapsychology, they would call that a SPE, a spontaneous paranormal experience, one that you're not seeking out, one that just happens. And now the Rohs Opera House does rents out for investigations on Fridays and Saturday nights, and sometimes Sundays, or just Friday, Saturday.
Well, we have it where you can book online Fridays and Saturdays.
Okay.
But if you're coming through town on a Sunday, or if you have a Monday night that you want to do, those are ones that you just need to reach out to us, email us. Our email address is on the website, and we can work those out. But Fridays and Saturdays we found were very, very popular nights, so we've made it to where you can reserve the night on our website, and it would be exclusively your group's night. So we don't book multiple groups. It's your group, whether that be 2 people or whether that be 8 people that you want to bring in. The theater's all yours. We'll give you a tour. We'll give you the keys, and we walk out the door and go home, and the theater's all yours. Stay all night long, and when you leave, you just lock up for us and drop the key in the mailbox.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You can go to rohsoperahouse.com. That's ROHS operahouse.com and click on the paranormal link, or is it the rental link that they get to?
It's paranormal. I think it says paranormal.
If you go to the paranormal link on the website, then there's a link there that says click to book your hunt today.
Yeah.
So if anywhere close or making a trip to the Midwest area, sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper or more affordable. We hate to use the word cheaper. More affordable than most places. We do ask for a $60 deposit because we are in such demand. We found that before we took a deposit, people would say, "Hey, we're coming, block us in," and then they not show up, and it'd be too late to get another group in there. So check that out. Book out far enough in advance, and we'll accommodate you if we can.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you participate in any? Well, you just said that you kind of hand off the keys and then you leave. Has anyone asked you to hang out, or have you ever done any overnights yourself?
When my kids were, and my kids are all grown now. I've got 3 kids. When they were in that high school age, middle school age, they loved to have, ghost hunts with their friends. And so, yeah, I would stay for those. I've stayed for a few. But of the 4 of us partners, there's 2 of us that's really into that, and they tend to stay more than me. But I've done a few.
That's cool. The ghost walks. Now, is that just kind of like a tour of the theater, or do you also go around town?
We also go around town. That was something we started early on, probably the second year we were in business. Movies just weren't bringing enough people in to keep the doors open. We had all these ghost stories in the theater, but also downtown Cynthiana had about 4 or 5 really cool ghost stories. And so we packaged them all together. we had done a ghost walk in Charleston, South Carolina, and so we thought we could do it as good, if not better, than them. And so we started walking around town. We do an hour walk in downtown Cynthiana and do a half-hour presentation inside the theater. The inside part is, we show them videos, we show them pictures, listen to EVPs, stuff that groups have captured, and it took off. We have over 1,000 people every year come to Cynthiana. City of 6,000 people. 1,000 people will come and take our ghost walk every October. So it's been a huge hit.
That's really cool. And so, yeah, I mean, you mentioned it just now. It seems like October is the month, right? That's like the big month. But I'm guessing that, do you do the ghost walks any other time of the year? I guess if there's a demand, or mostly just October.
Mostly just October. If we got a group of 10 or more, we would do it for that group. And sometimes we'll get that. A group is someone's having a wedding in town and they have out of town visitors coming and want something to do. We'll put that together. We've also added a couple of other walks. We do a history walk, and then we have an old city cemetery that goes back to 1790. We do a cemetery tour of that and tell some of the stories of the people buried there. And some of those are ghost stories and witch stories and soldier stories. So we've taken that ghost walk and the paranormal. It all came out of our paranormal experiences, and just made that a revenue stream to keep this old 152-year-old building open.
Wow. Can you give us a little tease of one of the Cynthiana ghost stories here?
One of my favorite goes back to pre-Civil War, 1847. There was a man named David Shealy who was accused of murdering his wife in a drunken rage. So he was hanged, only hanging in Cynthiana history. But shortly after that, his ghost started to be seen walking the countryside and would have experiences with people for about 20 years. And then a guy on his deathbed 20 years later confessed to the murder, that it wasn't David, it was this guy, and he had blamed it on David. So David had been hung for a crime he didn't commit, and that's why he was still walking the countryside. So that's a pretty cool story, because there's things in there about after they hung him, they buried him, and a doctor dug up his bones to use his bones in his medical practice. And so that's one of my favorite ones. And we actually took that and wrote a play around it. It was such a cool story that we wrote a play, and we did that in our old county jail courtyard as a dinner theater. And uniquely Cynthiana, and it was a pretty big hit.
Oh, what'd you call it?
It was Dinner with David Shealy.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
cool. Yeah, that is. That story does have, this the pillars of, like, it's someone who's been, unjustly killed. Their spirit wanders, and if you're the guy who blamed him, the last thing you want to be seeing is that dude's ghost walking around. Right. And you hear all these people talking about how his ghost is walking around, and you're just like, oh man, this guy, he's literally haunting me by walking around the countryside. And it is interesting that, upon him confessing the truth, it almost releases David's spirit can finally rest, or I suppose, however we say it. It is, right. It's interesting to me, like, when I hear that and we're talking about it, like, just how important the truth is to us, right? Like the truth is that important to us, that even after death we will remain somewhere looking for it. That seems pretty profound to me, because a large part of me was always like, well, after death, I think most of the stuff that we worry about, if not all of it, is just going to fall by the wayside and be like, oh yeah, I don't need to worry about that anymore, because now I'm connected to whatever it is that's bigger and brighter than everything I imagined. So all these earthly physical things that I was concerned about have just melted away instantly. But it is interesting when we examine the history of the paranormal and specifically a lot of famous ghost stories that apparently there are certain ideas and concepts and things that transcend apparently physical form, huh? And
Right.
and then you're just like, okay, well, can I apply this to everything else? Can I apply this to the woman in the white dress? Can I apply this to what's the boy doing here? um I think you're right, though. I think you can go crazy looking for answers when most of the fun is partially never knowing, right?
Right. We would
Although,
probably be we would probably be let down,
that's
if
interesting. That's
we
interesting.
found out what the
Yeah, it's like yeah, it is because I think a lot of our expectations too can be formed by, whether it's movies or TV or other stories, and we're like, well, this has to be some grand story too. And but then if it's not, if it's something as simple as, the kid liked the theater and it was one of his favorite places to run off to, and he had an hour he knew he could sneak away from the house,
right,
and that's it. It was just a fond memory for him.
right.
It's like, oh, okay, that's it. There's no, was there a body he was looking for? Was he told was this like Stand By Me? Did they like find a body by the railroad track? But I'm curious about so now the theater is kind of doing everything, right? You're doing movies, you're doing live performances, you're doing ghost walks, you're doing paranormal investigations. Um, have you ever had anyone stop by for an investigation and they almost, not immediately, but very quickly, they're like, you know what, we're turning in the keys because we need to get out of here?
No, not really. Uh, and none of us, and no group that I know that has come in has ever felt threatened, or that there was some kind of an evil spirit here that wanted to harm you. So we've never had that. And then, most groups come in, they're very respectful of the place. I've come to really like ghost hunting groups because they are some of the kindest, very respectful people. They respect the place they're in. They seem to respect the ghosts. The groups that have come in and like tried to provoke the spirits, they get nothing at our place. And if you think the ghosts are kids, women, if you come in and start yelling and trying to provoke a spirit, they're just going to not play that night. But if you come in with toys and, gadgets that light up, you tend to have some success because the spirits, especially the children, seem to like to play. And if they're in a playful mood and they're there, some groups they just keep coming back 3 or 4 times a year because they have such a good time.
That's awesome. What's the perfect night for you? Like if you were to like plan it out and everything would come to fruition that you wanted, like in general for the theater itself. Like, what can you lay that out for me?
For the theater itself, it would be one of those nights where we've had something very exciting that sold out, like a play. 200 people in there just having a great time, a lot of really high energy. And then that's over and they go home, we clean up, and then a ghost hunt group or a paranormal investigation group shows up wanting to do an investigation, and we walk them around. And there's been nights that I've been doing a tour to get a group started, and you can just feel the electricity in the air. Your hair stands up on the back of your neck because you know that there's just something there and you can sense it. And so then you turn the keys over to them and go, and they turn out the lights, and they have one of those nights where just they're sitting around saying, hey, will you give me a sign that you're here? And their EMF meters go off and start flashing. And we've had times where groups will whistle a tune and get that whistle, repeat it right back to them note for note. So that would be the ideal night. Now I'm not gonna sit here like, you know, my friend says ghost hunting is like fishing. Sometimes they're biting, sometimes they're not. Not every night is like that here at the Opera House. Sometimes we'll have four people show up for a movie, and then the ghost hunt group will show up and they won't get anything. But it's just that's the nature, I think, of theater. It's sometimes it's on, sometimes sometimes it's not. But that would be my ideal night, just where everything falls in place and lots of people are happy and having good experiences.
Yeah, I do notice too that that the theater's been on Biography Channel's My Ghost Story. Was there a specific story that was featured on that, or someone's experience there at the theater?
There was a couple. Two of my partners were interviewed for that, and so they tell their story. So I think that's on YouTube, or it may be out there. I would encourage people to check that out, because you'll get two other partners' stories on things that they've experienced there. So that was a neat experience. We had another group just last fall came and filmed a pilot for a show. It hasn't come out yet, but and I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but that's going to be coming out sometime this year. So we should be featured on that show, and we'll put that on our website whenever we find out.
Okay, cool. It's an interesting background that you come from as well. You're talking about being a minister, and now you're doing this. I'm not sure if you're still doing.
I still do some. I'm not full time. I actually got elected mayor.
Oh, I'm talking to the mayor right now.
Yeah, you're talking to the mayor.
You buried the lead, James. Like talking to the mayor of Cynthiana right now. I should be calling you Mr. Mayor this whole time. I feel like I've been disrespecting you.
No, James is fine. But, I think what we did at the theater is what, really helped me get elected, in the community. Because we did turn the theater around, and that led to work in the city. But I forgot what the question was, but
I don't even remember what the question was. I just remember my moment of realization.
Oh, my background. You were talking about my background. I still preach some. Yeah.
Still preach some. You're the mayor. You're helping run the opera house.
Tell ghost stories on the side. Yeah.
Tell ghost stories. You're auditioning for live plays.
Some people have come up and asked me, well, how can you be a minister and tell ghost stories? They ask me that sometimes, and ghost stories are, there's ghost stories found in the Bible. The witch of Endor raised up the spirit of Solomon or King Saul. Ghost stories have been with us, as far back as you can remember. And my grandparents used to tell me ghost stories, and so telling a story, use stories all the time. Whether it's true or not, we each individually have to believe that. Did David Shealy really walk, around Harrison County looking for the people who falsely accused him? I have no idea, but it's a cool story. Nobody can prove it one way or the other because it was 100 and some years ago. But
there's a very important role that storytelling has, in our culture, in every culture. And I think when the lines get blurred between, hey, I'm giving you information and I'm telling you a story, that's where confusion for all of us sets in. And I think we've experienced a lot of that with those lines being blurred through the evolution of what media is throughout the years. And the more complex everything gets around us, the more difficult it can be to differentiate between the two sometimes. And also understanding that some stories are actually giving us information. And there's no better way to convey thoughts, feelings, emotions, or information or lessons or things like that than through an engaging story. And
Right.
if someone wanted to look at the David Shealy story and be like, oh, it's just all made up. Well, yeah, okay, maybe it's made up, but like you said, it's a really good story. And it's also, if we really wanted to look at this, it's also teaching us something. It's teaching us that, you know, sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes things happen to you that are beyond your control and you can't stop, even though it's not right. And the other side of that is, you know, it teaches us that, hey, if you don't tell the truth about something and you blame someone else for something you did, guess what? It's going to haunt you.
Right.
It's going to have implications in your general area as well,
Right.
wherever you are. It affects things around you. And you won't be free from that until you finally admit it. And that's an
Right.
interesting story and a lesson as well, even if it's not true, right?
Right. My experiences with the paranormal at the theater uh, has not caused me to question my faith and what my beliefs are spiritually. It's caused me to be more humble and realize that I don't know everything, and we're not told everything. And so there's life after death, and I better take care of things on this side, so I'm not stuck in a 150-year-old theater on the other side.
Scaring other people who are easily scared for fun.
That's right.
Yeah, I think, talking about having the humility and being humbled by it, and to me that's such a big component of moving forward for all of us. And because I mean, I need to find my humility from time to time. I need to be humbled every once in a while. And and then when it happens, you're just like, oh, that's right, like, wow, I was really just kind of like going off the rails there. um but it is it is really fascinating, because for me, there's fewer ways to feel more alive than when you think you're communicating with the dead or having an experience with someone who is at least physically dead, right? It brings us, and we hear this at funerals a lot, and after we lose people that are close to us, you hear people say, you know what, their life, their death has made me appreciate my life more,
Right.
and made me realize, like, oh wow, I need to be refocusing my energy in my life while I still have it. And so, it makes me think that the meaning of life is to give other people's lives meaning
Hmm.
in that kind of way. And it's kind of like an endless cycle, but of goodness, that keeps getting paid forward and forward and forward in that way. But there's there is that weird, I don't know if it's not kind of, it's connotations, but it's also like there's these attachments and there's these associations with ghosts and things like that. I mean, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school for 12 years, a very Catholic family. um and like you said people would ask you, like, how can you tell ghost stories and be a minister? And because there are these associations with, like, the darkness and with the devil and all, like, even if you like to talk about this or look into it, then it's like you're dealing with the devil or the badness,
Right.
which I'm not exactly sure where all of that stems from. um I don't know if you
Yeah, I
have
don't.
any idea where it comes from either.
I I think things that we don't understand as people, I think it's human nature, paint those as bad because we don't understand it. And so, we don't understand ghosts. Even those people who are in that world don't understand what they are, who they are, how they can still be communicating with us from the other side. And so, I think just that ambiguity makes some people want to push that into the dark places, into the corners, and say, "Well, I don't understand that, so it must be bad." If God wanted me to understand it, He would have spelled it out, word for word, so I could understand that. And uh, if God had to spell out everything that we're going to experience in the world, the Bible would be so big that we wouldn't be able to pack it around. And
yeah, there's
I
no
don't
reading
know.
of there's no getting through a book that big.
No, we're getting pretty deep.
Well, I like that.
I don't have the answers to those things, but
Okay. Well, as
it's fun to talk about, though. I will
Yeah.
say it's fun to talk about, even though we may not have the answer.
That is 100% what I believe. It is. It makes it exciting. It makes it so interesting. And you mentioned earlier, if we knew the reason, we may be disappointed. I think that kind of applies here as well. Like if all of this was so easily explainable that everyone alive understood it already, then it would just be like, oh, a wheel rolls because it's round and there's gravity down a hill.
Right.
We wouldn't spend any time thinking about it, or we would just be getting in our cars and driving, or on our bicycles. We wouldn't even be thinking about how it works or what's at play. It would just be part of our normal world. And I do think when it comes to the paranormal, it's only a matter of time eventually in the future when the paranormal is normal, because we do understand it potentially. Now, this could be hundreds of years in the future, but
Right.
but for now, it's paranormal because we don't understand it, and that's why it's so fascinating.
Right.
This has been great. I can't wait to get back to the Midwest, and because Dayton's about 45 minutes from Cincinnati, so I'm like 2 hours from where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to we'll keep in touch, because I think it could be really fun to. I've had this idea to do like it's more of a it's a heavily focused like paranormal comedic storytelling from my own experiences, and then also present some evidence as well. And then it would be really fun to, and then after the show, I could stay with maybe a few people and we could actually do an investigation of our own. I think that could be a really fun night down there.
I bet it could. It sounds fun.
Yeah. So, and it'd be great to meet the mayor. I get to.
I may even come out and hunt with you.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, we got that on record. It would be my first investigation with the mayor, a mayor of any kind. So that would be exciting. James, this has been a lot of fun. Yes,
it has.
Thanks for doing this. Is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with before we wrap this up?
No, just if you're in the area, check us out. You gave our website. It's www.rohsoperahouse.com. That's ROHS. We also have a Facebook page. You can see us on Google. Check us out if you're in the area. Come for a movie, come for a play, or just, sign up for one of the overnight investigations. And we'd love to have you in our town and in our theater.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And it sounds like a place that's fun to investigate the way you've described it. And I enjoy those. I enjoy those kind of investigations when you're not worried about, I smell sulfur, or
right.
One of those kind of moments.
That's right.
Yeah. So that sounds rad. That sounds really, really cool. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with me today. I appreciate it. And, who knows, I'll be in touch with potentially maybe later this year sometime, because I'm out in California now. We'll be until probably summer, but I'll be in touch about that, so people listening can also keep that in mind. So, and until next time, my friend, it's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, great meeting you as well.